everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this school board meeting tonight. It is 7 o'clock and we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And the first thing on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda as submitted. Do we have a motion?
Second.
Again, we have a motion and a second. Now, is there any public comment about the agenda? Seeing none, do we have any online comment?
No, Mr. Varner, thank you.
Seeing none, we'll go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously. We'll move on. The second item is the flag salute, would be Laurel Crossman.
Please rise.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, before we move on, I'd like to also tell you that Trustee Carini will be joining us tonight by telephone. Dawn, can you hear us? Yeah. Not on yet. Okay, apparently he's not quite on yet, but we'll go ahead and move to item number 3, which is the superintendent report. This is for information only, Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, President Varner. Members of the board, welcome tonight. I'd also like to thank our friends from the community for coming out tonight. We have some special guests. I'd like to begin by introducing Valerie Dockery and Christine Perkins. If they'd come forward, they've got some special guests from Harley-Davidson that are here with them tonight.
Good evening, members of the board and the public. I'm Valerie Dockery, Director of Grants and Special Projects for the district, and I'm going to actually turn this over to Christine Perkins. She is our McKinney-Vento Special Projects Manager, and she's going to talk about a wonderful donation that we received from Harley-Davidson. Go ahead.
Good evening. This is Christy Perkins here. We wanted to take this time to honor the Harley-Davidson Eagle Mark Bank. They are giving us a very generous donation of $40,000, which is going to go to student housing. We already have 2 students in the Spirit of Hope housing, our unaccompanied youth, who we're able to get them into a home that they will be able to stay in through graduation. And this donation is helping with their rent, Wi-Fi so they can access their curriculum, their content, transportation to help get them to and from school. And we have 22 students right now who are unaccompanied in the high school, and we're hopeful that some more students will qualify for this program and we can pay for a stable living situation through graduation. This is an enormous donation, and we are so excited to be a partner with this company, and we are looking forward to having many more donations, hopefully in the future.
Right, and we're also going to be, supporting some of our other McKinney-Vento projects like busing. We have a lot of specialized busing. God bless Cherie Fletcher for helping us get our kids to school on special bus routes outside the regular routes, and some of those other projects like that we have for our children in transition.
I'm Amber Kellner. I am a board director for Eagle Mark Savings Bank, which is an affiliate of Harley-Davidson Financial Services. We're very pleased to be here. This is Nelia. Go ahead.
I'm Nelia Nizio. I'm Senior Regulatory Compliance Analyst for Eagle Mark Savings Bank, Harley-Davidson Financial Services. And we, together with other board members and committee members, we organize and manage the Community Reinvestment Act. And this donation, $40,000, it's part of our compliance with the Community Reinvestment Act, and we are very, very pleased and happy to be here and supporting the community we are in.
So thank you to Christy, and I know you'll make very good use of this.
If you want to get some pictures.
Sure.
Thank you.
Oh, before you guys leave, I'd just like to say what a wonderful gift. I can't think of a better use for that money. And just thank you guys very, very much. We truly appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
I just want to also thank you for that, and I really appreciate how it is directed towards students that are really at high risk. And I appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into the grant and how you're giving back to the community that way. So thank you very much.
And you know, one of the other things I want to point out is that Harley-Davidson is a very generous donor to Food for Thought, which obviously provides a lot of meals to our students during the weekends. And so Nalia is a member. She's a director on the board, and Harley-Davidson is helping a lot of families in Carson City. And so usually you're not at the meetings, and so I just want to say thank you. We recognize all you're doing for the kids.
Any other board comment? Once again, just thank you. Very generous gift, and can't think of a better use for the money. Thanks again. Go on, Mr. Stokes, if you have other
I
reports.
do. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, community members. We have some champions here with us. We hope to be able to see their faces and names on the front of a Wheaties box here before too long. But we're delighted really to have students back in our presence. Thank you for being here. I'd like to turn a little time over to Coach Rob Ma. He is been in the gym for many years as a volleyball coach, and he's brought a championship team here with him this evening, and I'd like to turn some time over to him.
I'm not used to sitting, I'm used to standing on the sidelines. But President Varner, appreciate that, and Mr. Stokes, appreciate that. So girls, come on up, why don't you stand up? So you just gotta stand up, because you're gonna be recognized. This is really cool.
And
So-
if parents would like to get a photograph,
Yeah.
they can.
Parent, come stand by your child or yeah, take the pictures. So, yeah, school board members, this, our team this year is from Carson Middle School, and they won the Taneva Championship about 3-4 weeks ago down in Douglas. And this team is, you know, I consider all the teams, I've coached a lot of teams like Mr. Stokes said over the years, and I've had great privilege of getting to know them. And the cool thing is that not only do I work with these girls, but Grace Turner this year was, she came back, she's a high school senior, and she's one of my assistant coaches, and so she gets to be a good example of the girls as well. So I appreciate her coming and doing that stuff. But we traveled to Winnemucca, played Lovelock, Winnemucca, Alder Creek, South Lake Tahoe, of course, Carson Valley, Eagle Valley. So we played 24 games this year, a lot of games for middle school. And so these girls are kind of exceptional in the fact that they can keep their grades up and stay organized and compete on the court as well. So I'm really proud of them, and I'll just let them introduce themselves and say hi, if that's acceptable. Yes. So
Yes,
we'll
it
start
is.
down here. Yeah. Oh, hey, it's portable.
So you just like say your name? What do I say? Just say like you're Sophie. Oh my gosh, okay. I'm Sophie. And I'm 14 and I'm an sorry. I'm an outside hitter. I'm Betsy and I played left back. I'm Abby and I played middle. I'm Haley and I played middle back.
I'm Soleil and I play setter or any hitter.
I'm Kiana and I'm actually a 7th grader and I play outside. I'm Addison and I'm also a 7th grader and I play setter / right side hitter.
It's nice to be here. Thank you for inviting us. I'm Melanie Martinez. I'm number 11, and I play middle back.
I'm Emily and I play middle back. I'm Allison and I play middle back.
I'm Julie and I played setter and a little bit of middle.
I'm Hannah and I play middle front.
So I think that's most. I think we're missing just one or two girls that I know of. But I will say, I do appreciate the support from our community and from our board members and from our school district. I did teach in Vegas for a year, quite a few years ago, and we didn't have middle school sports. We had one sport, it was basketball, and that was it. So we're glad we have sports in middle school. We're glad we get to play, and we're glad masks are off and we get to exercise harder on the court. So thank you. And any questions you can ask them, or we're good to whatever. You're Grace Turner.
Joe, go ahead.
Well, first, I just want to say congratulations. It's always nice to be champions. But it's just great to be a team. I think what you learn in middle school, I mean, I grew up playing sports, and you know, it's a team, but it's also an individual effort, and it'll take you a long way because you learn how to work with people, and you learn how your contribution's important. And we just appreciate everything you're doing. And you'll find as you get older, you get into high school, and you start thinking about whether it's college or going out into the workforce, and you're building resumes. These kinds of things are important too for that. So, you know, don't forget to like pencil this stuff down and all your accomplishments along the way, because it really pays off and it goes a long way. So congratulations to all of you.
Well, there again, I'd just like to say congratulations to you guys. Great season. And you guys are a wonderful example for the community. Thank you. You can stick around if you want. Thank you guys again.
Mr. President, members of the board, I just have one final item that will close out my report. Just a reminder to trustees and to members of the community that this year, based on a legislative change, there will be a modification to when students who are going into kindergarten and how their age now has been changed. So the student must be 5 years of age on or before the first day of school, which this year is August the 15th. So if you have any questions, I'd encourage you to contact your child's school. And if you have any questions, of course, you can also contact the school district office. We've also got information on our webpage. That is www.carsoncityschools.com. And with that, Mr. President, I'll end my report. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We'll go on to item number 4, which is board reports. Do we have anybody here from Carson High School? Come on up.
Hi there. So I'm Sarah Wiggins, the representative from Carson High. And to start us off, this last Friday, we had Mr. Carson High here, and I would just like to say that Adam Solik won, and great guy, definitely deserved it. A lot of fun. Everybody that went there was a lot of fun. So yeah. Moving on to academic letter, that is tomorrow night at 6:30. Everybody should have gotten a letter in the mail, and if you're unsure about whether you got it or not, you can go into the guidance office for more information and to ask about that. This Friday as well, we have one of our students, excuse me if I say his name wrong, it's Chris Colum. He is a freshman this year, and he has lymphoma cancer. He's been battling this, from what I've heard, for the last 6-ish months or so. And so on Friday, we want most of the students to wear lime green or green if possible, just to show our support for him. Moving on to the next item, we have Host the State this next weekend. So that's going to be starting on Sunday, competing all the way through Tuesday and finishing off Wednesday. So just wishing everybody who competes good luck. And then finally, with some of our spring sports. This Saturday, I know we have a track meet, so that's at home. So you guys can come if you want to support Carson High. That starts at 9 a.m., I believe. And then I know that we had a softball match today. I'm unsure about how that went, but I think they did good. And moving on from that, if you want more information about any of that, you can go on to the Carson High website. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. You always do such a wonderful job. Thank you. We'll move on. Do we have anybody here from Pioneer Academy or high school? Seeing no one, do you have a report? Anybody?
For NASB?
Well, for Pioneer, and then we'll go on to NASB.
No, that would be me, but I spoke to Principal Zona. He's here, so
Okay,
he's going to cover us.
all right, cool. Then we'll go ahead and move on to the Nevada Association of School Boards update.
So I apologize, Rich. I thought you were looking at me when you were talking at Joe.
Well, that's all right.
So just a couple things. Of course, there's training coming up next weekend. We should have all registered with Renee. I think Laurel and I were talking. We'll need to get the details kind of finalized, make sure everybody knows where the meeting is in Washoe County. And then other than that, recently, Deb Oliver has tendered her resignation as the executive director. And so we will have an emergency directors meeting on Friday night. So more details about the process to replace her will be coming out soon, I would guess.
Thank you for your report. We'll go ahead and move on to board reports, and then we'll do the association report next. Joe, you want to start?
Yeah, none for me tonight.
Mike?
So Mark Twain Elementary School celebrated Reading Week last week, and they had a number of dress-up days. They had a hot air balloon on campus. There were also a number of guest readers, but the highlight of the week was a daily 15-minute free read to really emphasize the value and importance of reading daily. So Mrs. Clario said that was an excellent event. And then they just wanted to recognize their social worker, their school social worker, Caitlin Griffiths. So this is National Social Workers Week, and she just wanted to make sure that everyone thanked her for the hard work and contributions to the school. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Stacy?
I got a message from Carrie Finn, and she wanted to let everybody know that there's a golf tournament supporting Holiday with a Hero, and it will be on May 14th at 9 a.m. at Silver Oak Golf Course. And to contact, you can do holidaywithahero golf@gmail.com to get more information. And it's $125 per player, includes range balls, goodie bag, and lunch.
Thank you, Stacy. Lupe?
From Silicone Elementary School, Ms. Zona would like to also remind the families that registration for kindergartners started yesterday, March 7th, and it will go through the end of June. She is asking that parents call their number 283-2200 to make an appointment to register their child. And it's a reminder, they will need child birth certificate and current immunization records and proof of residency. And then she also wants to remind the families that daylight savings time begins March 13th. Thanks for supporting the annual Leprechaun Chase. The proceeds from the fundraiser is used for educational equipment for their amazing specialists, and forgive me if I mispronounce their names, Mrs. Sakalarlos, Ms. Dining, and Mr. Van Orman. The chase will be held on St. Patrick's Day, March 17, and it's free dress if students wear green. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. Laurel?
Okay, for Fritz Elementary School, Mr. Brown would like to thank all of the Fritz families for participating in Reading Week and having fun during their Steaming with Dr. Seuss evening on Tuesday, March 1st. Also, they'd like to share that they're the top dogs for the month of February for doing it the Bark way. So those classes are Mrs. Russell's first grade class, congratulations, and Mrs. Kingman's fifth grade class. And BARK at Fritz is an acronym, and it stands for Be Positive, Acting Responsible, Respecting Themselves and Others, and Keeping Safety Number One. So congratulations to Mrs. Russell and Mrs. Kingman's classrooms. And for Fremont Elementary School, they had a very successful reading night. They had 4 nights of bedtime stories with an average of 62 families logging on for an hour of bedtime stories with staff. They had readers from Mayor Bagwell to Chief I'm going to slaughter his name. I want to say Salmon, and it's not right. Slayman. There we go. Chief Slayman. To the zooming in Disney, and they also had Disney princesses zooming in. And the students read so many minutes in each wing that they got a special treat from the PTA, and they got to see Dr. Ward and Mrs. Pryor dress up like SpongeBob and Patrick. I have a picture, Mr. Davis, if you would like it. And also, they would like to, it was a really great week, and Dr. Ward would like to extend a huge shout out to the staff that created and supported this wonderful week for the students. And Fremont staff are gearing up for the second round of parent conferences and encourage parents to be on the lookout for the sign-up sheets. And then also, I just wanted to share some information further regarding the freshman student, Chris Coulomb. And there's an effort you've probably seen going around, started by some high school students for Kindness for Chris, where they're encouraging acts of service this week. And also, Chick-fil-A here in Carson City is hosting a fundraiser for him on Tuesday, March 15th from 5 to 7 p.m. So if you don't have dinner plans, make them at Chick-fil-A that night, or go get a milkshake if you need to. It supports a good cause. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. Dawn, can you hear us?
Could Laura, will you tell us what that date was again?
March 15th, 5 to 7 p.m.
Thank you.
Dawn, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Do you have a report tonight?
I do. From Dr. Conley over at Eagle Valley Middle School, their very own Luna Arredondo Rodriguez, a 7th grade orchestra student, was in the Nevada Appeal this weekend. She was one of 3 students who have won the 6th annual Rosemary Nebesky Memorial Scholarship given out by the Carson City Symphony Association this year. The award goes to music students ages 5 through 17. And that's all I have tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Don. I have a report also tonight, but before I start my report, I'd just like to say that I was fortunate enough to be one of the judges for Mr. Carson High, along with Mr. Stokes, and it was a great event. These kids really put on a good show. They really tried and showed their talent. But I wanted to congratulate Adam also. He did a great job, but they all did a great job. This week at Boardwick Bray, the students having their reading week. I was fortunate enough also to be asked to be a guest reader for 3 different classes, and 2 4th grade classes and 1 1st grade class. And I tell you, these kids are full of energy. There's so many questions. They're so inquisitive and well behaved while I was reading. I really enjoyed it, and I hope everybody who had the chance to read enjoyed it as much as I did. So this week, like I said, they're having their reading week, and they have a lot going on. The students are reading every night and turn in their minutes to earn prizes and help their school earn a goal of 40,000 minutes. Now, if the kids reach 40,000 minutes of reading, then the principal, vice principal, and Mr. DeJoseph are going to let them squirt them down with water pistols, and throw water balloons at them. So everybody's being encouraged to read that 40,000 minutes. And as of today, I believe they're at 14,000 minutes. So when I was reading, I really encouraged them to get to that 40,000 minutes. Also this week, they're having bedtime stories via Zoom at 7 p.m., and that's for the rest of the week. And the website or the Zoom meeting to get on that should have went out by Parent Square. And they're also having their daily dress-up days. And like I said, they're having guest and Mr. Readers and other fun events throughout the week. At Carson Middle School, the principal, Mr. Sadler, would like to honor the 2022 Honor Orchestra, Alicia Barrios, Candace Schnabel, David Del, I'm going to below this one too, Fiorino Tino, and Samra Titrick. And then the 22 Honor Choir, Lily Foster, Haley Miner, Grace Cindergaard, Chloe Vaccaro, Alicia Flesher, Liliana McGough, Bailey Reed, Jade Walking Bull, Dwayne Hoffman, Noah Isenson, Iron Rooney, and Robert Sins. And he just wants to really give them a shout out. They did a wonderful job this year. And they did make honor orchestra or honor choir. And that's the end of my report. Thank you. We'll move on to association reports.
Good evening, President Varner, trustees, Superintendent Stokes, and members of the public. I am Brian Wallace, the president of OCA, which represents the certified staff within the district. OCA would like to thank each of you for your time and dedication that was put forth in hiring a new superintendent who will continue to lead us forward as a district. OCA appreciates the opportunity for input throughout the whole process. OCA looks forward to continuing our work with all stakeholders to meet the goals of this district, to work together to provide our children with the skills, knowledge, values, and the opportunities to thrive. OCA looks forward to officially meeting with and working with Dr. Goldhart and welcoming him to Carson City. On a side note, though, we have to prepare to get ready to say goodbye to Mr. Stokes and everything he's done for this district. And OCA would like to greatly thank him for his leadership for the past almost 15 years in various positions for this district and the opportunities he's provided OCA for our own growth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Move on to item number 6, which is public comment. Comments will be accepted in person or through virtual participation via email. Comments may be made by members of the public on any matter within the authority of this board. Please note that public comment will be taken on items marked for possible action before action is taken on such items. And members of the public are encouraged to comment on such items at the time they are being considered. Although members of the board may respond to questions and discuss issues raised during public comment, no action may be taken on such a matter until the matter is placed on the agenda for action at a meeting of the board. In making public comment, speakers are asked to come to the podium or table, sign in, speak into the microphone, identify themselves for the record. Speakers are asked to make their comments for no longer than 3 minutes and simply not repeat comments made by other people. At that, we'll open up for public comment. Do we have any public comment in person? Come to the table, state your name, please, for the record.
Robert Harris. I feel kind of weird not having a podium, but I'll make do. I wanted to say thank you, guys. It was a tough, stressful situation as a parent to have a new superintendent. I didn't think that it was going to go the way it did, but I'm glad that it did, because this way you guys can blame the community if it doesn't work out, because we really, really wanted Dr. Goldhart. So thank you. I also wanted to comment on the review of books. I had sent some questions from last meeting. There's a slew of money that was being approved for books, and as a parent, I'd like to know what's going on as far as the curriculum. I want to get more involved. I'm working with some other parents to try to start a group to get some review, and I wanted to know if there's any board members that'd be interested in working with a group of parents to review curriculum. I know there's a lot of books, but there's a national organization that has read a lot of the curriculum that are in schools today. And we can get a head start just to make sure that I know what my kids are being taught. So if anybody is interested, you guys all have my email. I've emailed all of you in the past. I would be very grateful to have some board support because I was under the impression that the board approved all curriculum, not just the money that went to the curriculum. And then to follow up, I did make some copies. I sent a couple board members the Nevada State Academy or the Nevada State Board of Assessments, just to kind of have where we are as a district. And if you guys would like them, I'd be happy to give them to you, just to kind of show where my frustration comes from when it comes to us being approaching standard. I don't think that's pretty well. I think it's approaching standard. It's not standard. And I would like to make some changes as far as us being at standard, not just approaching standard. So if you guys want them, I've got plenty of copies. I know you, or a few of you guys have them.
Right, yeah. If you want to leave them, then if somebody wants a copy, we can make sure they get it.
I've got them from 2018 to 2021, which shows a consistent level 2 approaching standard. So it's not COVID related, it's not nothing related to the past year or two.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep, thank you. Okay, thank you. We'll move on now to item number, I'm sorry.
We got to see if there's any more
Public
public comment,
comment.
and then the electronic too.
That's true. Any other public comment in person? Come to the podium or the table and state your name for the record, please.
Good evening, Elizabeth Sanders. Well, first off, I would like to thank the teacher at Carson High School, the gym teacher, publicly thank him for his actions on the Wednesday, the 23rd, I believe it was. I'd also like to thank the resource officers for their quick action. Who knows where that would have gone or what might have happened had they not have acted so quickly. I would like to not say an appreciation to the principal because this school should have been locked down or in a no moving stance, and the door should have been locked because nobody knew at the time of the incident what the circumstances really were at all. They had no idea. So I would like to thank the people who did their job, and I do not wish to say anything nice about Mr. Chambers on that one. And then my question is, I had spoken to the superintendent the day of the incident. How are we parents going to know how the changes are going to happen after this incident? You know, like what changes are going to be put into place? Because that was very scary. My daughter didn't go to school the rest of the week. She was petrified to go. I was petrified to let her go. I even kept my elementary school son home. You know, like there are school shootings all over the country, and there have been for years, and they're progressively getting more frequent. They're not getting less, they're getting to be more. And I know that every parent's worst nightmare is that happening. We send our kids to school to be safe, you know, in hopes that they're going to be safe, in hopes that, you know, something like that doesn't happen, and unfortunately it does. And I just would like to know what now that it has happened, unfortunately, what actions are going to be made sure to take place in hopes that it never happens again. I know that drills are constantly done, but why is it that drills are done and then when it actually happens, they're not put into place? Like, I'm really upset about that, and I'm sure other parents are too. And that's just all I had to say on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? In person? Now seeing none, we'll move on to online public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Varner. This comment is from Miss Bridgette Gordon. She's a counselor at Carson High School. There's a famous quote from Mr. Rogers that says, "When I was a boy, I would see scary things in the news. My mother would say to me, 'Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping.' Last week, when something scary happened at Carson High School, it was overwhelmed by the helpers. The staff, students, SROs, counselors, we all showed up to help, and because of that, nobody was harmed. I've spent endless hours with students who were impacted since that event, and the one thing they have repeated to me is that the staff member, administration, and SROs help them to feel safe. I've also watched them help each other to feel safe, and as always, I'm so inspired by these students. They face adversity with growth mindset, trying to find ways to be helpful to improve the future. A lot of adults who weren't there when it happened have questions, and that's fair, and for now, we have to trust that the Carson City Sheriff's Office and the school district are doing everything properly to complete a thorough investigation. In the meantime, I hope those who are concerned find ways to be helpers. I hope they attend our PTA meetings, complete the volunteer packet, and come to help in any way they can during the day, or become substitute teachers to meet our great need, or check their students' Infinite Campus daily and communicate with teachers often, or just keep us all in their hearts as we continue to do our best to educate their incredible young people." The next comment is from Ms. Cavner. She's a math teacher at Carson High School. "The events on February 23rd at Carson High School rattled all of us. It reminded me that we are no different than any other school and bad things can happen. I want to thank our administration team and the SROs who responded quickly and had their focus where it needed to be, on the teacher and students that were directly affected. I ask that teachers and parents please remember that if there's an accident on the road and you are stuck at the end of the backed up traffic, the first responders don't run to you to make sure you are okay. They run to the people who need help, just like our admin did. Because of this, the rest of us were safe, and we weren't alarmed by a lockdown being called, because a lockdown is only necessary in an active shooter situation, which is not what we had. Later, I was able to ask my students, was there any time during B2 when you felt unsafe? And their answers were no. I tell them that this is because we were safe. It was only in hindsight, when we were thinking about the what ifs, that made us uneasy. The teacher and students directly affected were the ones that needed help. We didn't need the rest of the school in fear when it was unwarranted. I asked my students to feel the weight of the situation, and I think about how we can grow from this to become a better, stronger Carson High School. I asked them to never think that something is a joke, and that if they see something concerning or someone says something concerning, to promise that they will say something to a trusted adult. Because this is an active investigation, there's a lot of information that cannot be released. Information that if parents knew, they wouldn't be saying the things they are saying online. Yes, I know I should stay out of the comment section. Even more concerning to me is that this is an opportunity for all of us as a community to help our youth learn how to respond in the face of something scary. Some of the comments being made online are not allowed for that to happen. I want to challenge all of you to take this as an opportunity to learn and grow. This is not something any teacher, administrator, student, staff member, or school wants to go through. But we were lucky because this ended in the best possible way. Our admin and district office have learned about who should respond and who should communicate and how. Mistakes were made, but we're only human after all. Parents and students, I challenge you to get involved. I encourage you to look into the SAVE, Students Against Violence Everywhere program. I believe this is a program that would greatly benefit our school community, but it needs to be student-initiated and student-led. If you care enough about our school to show up at the school board meeting, then you care to be an upstander. We are senators. This means that we have each other's backs. We look out for each other. We stand for positive change. We encourage the best in each other. This comment is from Barb Mathers. Congratulations to Dr. Goldhart, our new superintendent. I was disappointed to hear the slew of emails that came in during the last board meeting from staff who were defending the mediocrity of our school district. There was, however, a common theme that I did appreciate. We will support whomever the board selects. I welcome our staff to support Dr. Goldhart. I've also heard teachers and school board members say there are plenty of students who are thriving, specifically their own children, implying we shouldn't be concerned about being 50th in the nation or that our students aren't being taught. Gifted students excel no matter how terrible their district is. I graduated from Carson High in 2001 and had my share of poor teachers. I understand this concept firsthand. One of my art teachers showed up high on a regular basis to school. My biology teacher had us copy pages and pages of notes and watch movies like Outbreak while she sat at her desk and read the entire class period. My history teacher assigned a group project that felt like every other class period. I hated group projects because the lazy students always sat back and had me do the work because they knew I wanted to get a good grade. This person still works at Carson High. One of my English teachers was more concerned about being our friend and entertaining us, so this class often felt like a waste of time. He also teaches at Carson High. My point is, I'm not as concerned about the gifted students as I am for the students in the middle who lack motivation, don't have support from home, and are fine with performing at a mediocre level, which is what they're being taught. They need mentors to inspire them, which is why I am rooting for the mentor program in place at Carson High. I hope it changes our students' performance, just as I hope that Dr. Goldhart will carry out his plans for putting each student first, not settling for mediocrity. We don't want someone to fill the current superintendent's shoes. We want complete change. This requires getting back to teaching the basics of reading, writing, arithmetic, and history, and focusing on the strengths and weaknesses of each student, regardless of race, color, gender, etc. We want all of our students to excel. Here's to many years in our district and the success of every single student. As a side note, Ms. Mathers is frustrated that emailed comments are read after in-person comments. The slew of emails that came in during the last meeting from teachers, staff, principals, etc. was incredibly frustrating. They were able to listen to all the in-person comments, rebut them, and have the final word, while people attending in person don't get a chance to rebut. It's like physically going to the store and being in the line at the customer service desk, and the employee answers the phone. We're going to the meeting, sitting there for hours, and participating. Just a thought. Mr. Varner, let me refresh, see if we've had anything else come in.
Thank you.
I have one other comment, Mr. Varner.
Go ahead, please.
This comment is from Allie Gamble Cooper. I want to take another moment to thank all of you who have endured the last couple of years and for taking on the challenges you are sure to face in the future. We see you and we appreciate you, and I love seeing those amazing girls representing. Go Carson. I'm not a member of a fringe group, but rather a member of the exhausted majority. There are many of us in our community who trust you to do the job for which you have been elected. We do not expect you to change the very fundamentals of Carson City Schools. We appreciate the fact that you listen to reason and honor the duty to represent all members of the community. At this moment in time, there is a politically driven movement to weaken public schools and the vision our founders had when they conceived the concept of public education. There are a few things that have happened in the last few months that would lead a reasonable person to believe there are some politically driven decisions being made. Some of these decisions may appear to not have the interests of children, families, and staff of Carson City Schools. This movement has been demonstrated by Mr. Harris's public comment and his appreciation of Dr. Goldhart's hiring and his wishes to evaluate books and approve curriculum. We all know that our curriculum is approved by the state. I respect the views of all citizens of Carson City and the United States. I think it is important that we do not confuse the beliefs of some to be the beliefs of all. As educators and those who support public education, it is imperative that we stand for those with weaker voices and protect from all type of discrimination. Mr. Varner, I'm going to check one more time to make sure nothing else has come in.
Thank you.
Mr. Varner, that's all I have. Thank you.
And thank you.
So, Mr. Varner, I just
Sure.
wanted to, for people that are out there, I just wanted to provide some clarification. So if you're looking at the quality counts ratings of education, when you look at the academic measures, academic achievement, Nevada actually ranks 18th. When you factor in school financing and chance for success, which takes into account how educated parents are, the share of 3 and 4-year-olds enrolled in preschool, and the percentage of adults who have steady employment, that's when Nevada goes to 50th. So for those families out there who wanted to do some research, I just wanted to provide the real research. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Yeah, everybody get a copy. Do you have any comment?
My mic on. I just want the record to reflect, I think, Mr. Harris, that you were talking about the approval in our last meeting of the Carson City Schools Foundation money. Is that what you're talking about with the money for books? Okay, I just want the record to clearly reflect that that was not district money that we approved the transfer of. It was not any taxpayer money. It was money that was donated by people in the community out of the goodness of their heart to a private nonprofit organization, and it was providing books to those students who are enrolled in WNC, helping to pay for the books for the classes that they and their parents voluntarily decided to enroll in. So as far as whether or not that is anything that we should be, I don't see anything that would indicate our need to further review their bylaws simply required any expenditure over $10,000 to be approved. Wasn't our money, it was their money that they earned for the specific purpose that they were fundraising for.
And as a parent of a Jumpstart student, I would like to review it.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and close public comment at this time. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 7, discussion on proposed changes to Carson City School District Regulation 702, gifts, grants, donations, and this is for discussion only. And Mrs. Valerie Dockery is be presenting. Thank you, Valerie.
Good evening. I'm again Valerie Dockery, Director of Grants and Special Projects. It's been a while since we've gone back and looked at this policy, Regulation 702, gifts, grants, and donations. And we're circling back around with it now because there's been a lot of changes in the way that we're able to raise money in schools. We have something now called crowdfunding that we didn't have back in 2016. So if you look at this regulation, you'll see on the second page that this is where most of the changes are. You had this in your board packet. We define what crowdfunding is. Crowdfunding is defined as a web-based service used for the solicitation of goods, services, or money from a large number of people via the internet. And you may recall that earlier this year, the Nevada Department of Education took $8 million of the ESSER relief funds and put it into a crowdfunding platform to make it available to teachers all over the state for $800 grants for teachers to use in their classroom. So in looking at that and the platform that they chose, we looked at, we should have some policy around what platforms are being used in the district. So basically what we're saying here is we want to make sure that the platform that is being used by anyone in the district to raise money is one that the district approves of and has vetted. And one of the things that's really important to the district is that when crowdfunding takes place under the auspices of the Carson City School District, that those materials are brought to the district and are the property of the district. So we've included that in this policy, that anything that is fundraised for on behalf of the Carson City School District stays with the Carson City School District. That is in this policy that we've added. The district also wants to retain the right to choose the crowdfunding platforms that we use. Right now, the platform that we are using is called Donors Choose, the same one the state used. We have selected Donors Choose at this time. We could change that choice depending on other platforms that became available in the future. But we chose that one on purpose because it is vetted, because the materials and supplies come from specific vendors that are partners with Donors Choose, because the principals, myself, district leaders get printouts of what's been requested. Principals can approve those projects that the teachers are putting forward. The materials come directly from Donors Choose to the school. No money changes hands between the staff. And then it becomes the property of the school should the employee leave. So those things are really important to us. For example, I'll give you an example of GoFundMe. I can go on GoFundMe and raise money for a project. Say I'm doing a project for gifted kids and I raise $1,500. I get the $1,500. I can spend it on the kids, or if, I have $500 left or $100 left, I don't have to account for that money to the school district. The materials become my materials, not the district's materials, and I haven't checked with anybody on whether these are appropriate materials or not for these kids. So that's why we are saying if you are an employee of the district and you're raising funds on behalf of the district, we want you to use a program like Donors Choose, or the one that we select that has those controls in place. So that's where this policy comes from. So you can see throughout the policy, we have that this fundraising can only take part through these sources by an employee of the district, that they must be notified. We must be notified. These are things I've already talked about. We also have a piece in here about complying with our technology standards. We do not want to have, and there's a mechanism within Donors Choose where we had, if you're asking for money for something that you have to check off that you've had that vetted with our technology department, because we want to make sure that we're not buying a technology that the district doesn't support. It doesn't work within our system. We also have protections in there for students if pictures are taken, and there has to be written permission if the teacher or employee wants to use pictures as part of their ask for money. And that, again, that they be used only, they're solely used for students and for educational purposes. And again, if it's anything that's over $500, that it's asset tagged by the district. So we're just trying to firm up some of these things so that there is some controls in place for this kind of a fundraising mechanism. So those are really the overall changes to the regulation. Are there any questions about that?
Any board member questions for Mrs. Dockery? Joe?
So does this negate the ability for an individual teacher to use one of those avenues like Donors Choose?
Yes, if they are raising money for something in their classroom, they need to use an approved district platform, which tomorrow I will be, or this week I'll be putting out an email that Donors Choose is our platform. And we actually have our own landing page for Donors Choose that we'll be kicking off. We waited on purpose to kick it off because of the Nevada Department of Ed's kickoff with their giant piece. But yes, we want to make sure that people are, because we need to know what's coming into the district. It's no different than a donation coming in or a grant that, like this week, I had several teachers write grants that are a couple of $1,000s. That money comes to the district. We put it in an account, then they can spend it. And so we can make sure it's spent in accordance with the grant, and we help them because their job is not to go out and have to do purchase orders. That's where we come in to help them and to make sure that the funds are expended correctly. So it's really the same concept.
Stacy, go ahead.
Just out of curiosity, how many do we do you have an idea of how many people go after crowdfunding as teachers?
Well, I do know with the Nevada Department of Education piece, we had about of that $8 million. I know this doesn't sound like a lot. I think we had about $60,000 in teachers asked for through that crowdfunding source. But when you think about the whole state of Nevada and how big Clark County is just on its own, we had quite a turnout for that. So it's a platform that our employees like to use because it's relatively easy to do, rather than me having to write a, 10-page narrative to get, $50,000 or even some grants, $5,000 or less. They want lots of writing. It's a relatively simple application process for them to put out what their idea is for something they want for their classroom that the school can't afford. And then the principal can take a look at it, and it's in line with our curriculum and go from there.
And I think one of the other things that's really nice, more and more teachers are having to pay out of their own pocket to supplement what's happening in their classroom. They can actually get the products vetted. And then sometimes there's donors across the country who just go on there because they're wanting to donate to schools.
Some of our teachers got more than the $800 that was allocated to each teacher. Some of them got $1,000 or $1,500, depending on other donors that were out there that liked their project. So it's a great platform as long as there's some controls in place so that we can make sure that the money is actually going where it needs to go, and that that's a lot of responsibility when you're working with kids to have to be managing that money. And as again, they're picking from a select group of vendors on the materials that they're choosing, and it's very transparent. Everybody knows what's coming into the school. And for example, we had teachers at the high school in a special education department. They bought one of them got a washing machine, one of them got a dryer, another one got, I think, a microwave oven, and I think there was one other piece of kitchen or appliances for that employability class, life skills class. So they really used their creativity, and they all did different pieces to replace those pieces.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mrs. Dockery. And this is for discussion only, so
Yes.
no public comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 8. It's the annual report from Pioneer Academy on programs, supports for students and celebrations. And once again, this is for discussion only. Mr. Zona, principal.
Good evening. Jason Zona, principal at Pioneer Academy, 1 through 12. Okay, so the last several years I've been here, I'm a principal of a high school, and so that's probably 15 years experience. Half a year experience as a high school, a middle school principal, half a year experience as an elementary. So what happened this year was the Pioneer High School turned into 3 different schools. Really, it's actually 4. We have the high school on campus, we have the high school online, we have a middle school online, and an elementary school online. So it's been a big task for our staff, and I just wanted to go over a little bit. Thanks for having me, and let us go over some highlights. These are the main different areas we're going to cover. If there's anything you want me to go over first, or if you have questions, stop me along the way. The first one is about demographics. So I'm going to skip to that. So we, as a whole academy of 1 through 12, we have 222 students as of today. Those are kids who we have 4 that are starting tomorrow, so they're included. As a whole academy, we're about 7% gifted and talented, 5% EL, 18% IEP. And then we broke down the 3 categories of the high school, middle, and online, or elementary, and that's what we look like. So we have 1 teacher who handles our elementary at the bottom, and she also handles the 6th grade students. And then the rest of our high school teachers will handle all of the middle and high school students. What we did over the years, we have some beliefs as a high school, and we really, if you look at our beliefs they really go down from 1 to 12. We want kids to be college and career ready. It doesn't matter what grade you're in. There is a STEAM focus. Some of our beliefs are high school specific, but most of them really do transcend all the grades. And so we have the cute little symbols for the elementary. We have the paw, we have the angry cat for the middle school, and we have the shield for the high school. So this has been quite a transition for our staff. If you go away today with anything that I have to say, I just have to tell you, I've worked with some amazing educators since '96, and the staff we have on our campus right now are truly phenomenal. They inspire me every day. I'm honored to work with them. So they knock it out of the park. We will bring you guys some student testimonials from the middle schoolers and the littles, we call them, the elementary, at some point. But one of the things that we're proud about is the students do feel safe at Pioneer. That's been consistent over this last several years. It's probably due to our size. They feel taken care of and safe at all times. So some of the things we've noticed in our last 2 years, which has been very different, for our school, it is our highest population since 1998, which is good. We still have some room for more, 222 students. It is the lowest number of our senior class we've ever had, so we're usually top heavy. We usually have a lot of juniors and seniors. We have completely flipped that for the very first time in history. We have a lot more freshmen and sophomores, which could be a good thing because we have more time to work with them and straighten things out. We have the highest number of disciplinary referrals since we've been back, and I don't know that we're alone on that. So that has caused us to kind of look at our practices, look at our interventions, and that is definitely something we've observed. On a good note, Pioneer has been less transient in the last 2 years, probably due to COVID, but I think the less kids bounce around from school to school, the less they miss. So the implications really, we've adjusted our master schedule, course offerings, added the staff for elementary, and then looking at our interventions. So any questions on demographics?
I just have one real quick. Why do you think the flip in the seniors and juniors being lower than they have been in the past? What do you attribute that to?
You know, I'm not really sure. We're going to look at that some more. We do have some systems in place to welcome 8th graders in. So I know we're getting more freshmen due to some systems we can control. But other than that, this is the first year I've ever seen that. So to be continued. Really, what the magic really is in our people. I don't hire all the staff. Our team hires the team. And so based on who we're looking for, they will be there as a team member. And I probably should explain the photograph. We make our staff climb walls blindfolded. That is true. It is a team building exercise where it's all built to support each other. And that's kind of how we run everything. And so we go through the things that we put our kids through, push ourselves out of our comfort zone, and really get to know each other. The level of education of our staff, most of our teachers have master's degrees plus. Only 2 of our teachers are new. So we have about 80% have 7 to 27 years experience. And that is it's a big deal. We don't have a lot of loss of staff these days. I couldn't say that my first few years, but in the last 8 to 9 years, it's been pretty stable. We lose people for retirement, people move out of town, but otherwise our staff sticks around, which is it's good to note when they're top notch. I won't go over who's really. This is our team, and so like I said before, massively talented. Their heart's in the right place. This was during COVID, so they're 6 feet apart. So we're going to take another picture where we're shoulder to shoulder, and that's our goal. One of the neat things about our staff, there's 4 members who have taught at higher ed, so SNC, WNC, and UNLV. And so that's, like I said before, between 7 and 25 years experience, and only 2 new teachers. Questions about our team? Okay. What do we do with grant funding? So I have to thank Valerie Dockery and Jessica Greener for all their support for grants. With that money, we have several different pots at Pioneer. We purchase staffing, a full-time tutor, project discovery contract, where we take kids off campus, work on behavioral issues, 2 distance ed lab staff. We pay teachers who stay after contract time and they work on lesson plans, school social worker, and then part of our funding goes to the counselor and then summer school. You guys have probably heard about AVID by now. We're 3 years into AVID. This is huge because it helps them learn how to play school, and it helps all grades. We are really excited to go back to graduation as normal. We're hoping, if it all pans out, everything's good, we will be back in this building doing our, shake the hands, see the parents, fill up the theater, and that's what we're hoping to do again. I wanted to give you guys a frame of reference for the last 10 years. I know that's a long time back, but if you look at our school in 2012, we had 29.4% graduation rate. We hit a high of 82.3 pre-COVID, and then we took a dip last 2 years, and we're hoping to turn that back around. So we're really proud of the class of 2021. We had 55 seniors who started off in our cohort. At the time of graduation, 44 were still on our campus. And of the 44, 20 of them earned scholarships, like the Millennium Scholarship. We had 26 standard diplomas, 2 associate degrees from WNC for free, and that's just amazing. We're very proud of that. 6 advanced diplomas, 2 honors because they graduated early in 2020. 5 Jumpstart students, 8 adult diplomas, and we had 3 juniors graduate early. So this is what the kids are doing with when they walk across the stage. Questions about graduation?
Jason, I just wanted a couple of slides back too. I just wanted to say thanks because I've had a chance to meet with some of the staff over the few years. And you do have an exceptional staff. I mean, they're, number one, they're very open. When you talk to them, they do seem to really enjoy what they're doing. And I think that's important. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, it's hard to be good at it. And you guys have an atmosphere over there for learning. And then when I look at the, I think people have to remember Pioneer High School, kind of when it started, if you will, when we look back, not when it started, but say 2012, it was really a chance just to capture some kids and try to get a few more across the finish line, if you will. And it's grown into much more than that. I mean, we still do that. We still try to help kids, but it's grown into a bigger campus with more diverse needs and more diverse offerings. And I think, I remember early on, you'd hear the statistics about high school graduation rates and Pioneer's in trouble kind of thing. And you guys have gone so far past that and really have just done miraculous work. And I think, I think you can't possibly give you guys enough credit for what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll pass that along.
Please.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that you're missing on this is also the college credits that these kids are getting. I got to sit in Mrs. Allen's class, and they got their first credit from ASU, and their second semester they're working on their credit from WNC. And so that's not in here, but there's still a lot of learning going on there.
It's coming
a lot
up.
of opportunities.
I got a slide for you. A little bit about, used to be called JAG, Jobs for Nevada's Graduates. This is a program we started about 7 years ago. We actually were just hosting it. We were the only alternative high school to have it in the state. I think we're still the only alternative. The rest of them are comprehensive high schools. But really the cool thing about this one is they really get to explore careers, do some job shadowing. We don't pay for it as a district. It comes from the state. We get the staffing and the curriculum. And what was interesting at the second to the bottom bullet is that our kids who are in JAG or J4NG in 2019, 2020, the kids who were in it were 100% graduation. They walked across the stage. So we're really looking at that. And if we can keep kids in that program, that's definitely on our radar. The other cool thing about JAG is that a year after they graduate, they're being tracked and they're being supported by JAG, and they're being supported in the world of work and careers in higher ed. So something Mr. Cassiopo talked about way back. So back in 98, 2008, we were under the umbrella for accreditation of Carson High. We didn't have our own accreditation. So the first thing I was tasked with was to get the school accredited. So we did that. It took 2 years. So in 2009, we were accredited. We had 14 classes to offer. And then as the years went by, I put certain years in here of what our staff has added to the campus. So we went from 9 courses to 32 courses last year with approximately the same staff. And then this year we added 3 teachers, and we have 95 courses available from grades 1 through 12, which is a lot to ask of our teachers, and they're doing a fantastic job, and we're really proud of them. So that 95, it really, what it represents is if kids are interested, they're going to come to school. And that's what we want to do. We want to have exciting electives, prepare them for work, prepare them for higher ed, and have quality core classes. So that's what's turned into this year. Here are some of the courses we had to add. So we have the middle school, elementary, and high school up there. We have the electives, we have all the core classes, and then we have online for people who want to take extra. So the dual credit, and this is, I think what Stacy was talking about. So in 2012, 2013, we only had AP online. We had Jumpstart off campus. In 19 and 20, we added on campus the college prep. We added Communications 101. These were both with WNC. And then this year, we've added the Poetry in America with ASU and a Harvard professor. And then we have Literature to Film also with WNC. So all of those classes are now on our campus, which is gigantic for kids. And we had probably a class of 16 for one, 20 for another, and we just keep building. So. Questions so far? Curriculum? No? All right. Master schedule. So we're really proud of the master schedule. We have 360 minutes per day, which is the highest in the district. We made it earlier that kids get there, and we made it later that they leave. And it was interesting. Several years ago, we thought we would have an attendance problem with making it earlier for high school kids because that goes against a lot of the research you're hearing. We did not see that. Yes, there's an attendance problem because of COVID, and we're coming out of it. But when we went back to an earlier schedule, they still showed up late, but they were showing up. So our day is 7:35 to 2:15. We like those extra instructional minutes. It's a 4x4 block, 90-minute classes. We don't have a lot of passing time, so there's like 5 minutes in between classes, and there's only 2 times per day that they do that besides lunch. So we're maximizing that time. The other thing is that gives us 8+ credits per year. So. All right. If you guys have questions about accreditation, we can talk about that. Pioneer scored above the international average when we went through reaccreditation in 2019. So we're looking forward to having them back with our dual credits, and we look forward to that process. All right, students. One of the neat things about Pioneer is students taking charge, taking ownership, and actually improving their school. So I've got a picture here of this year we had a couple kids in engineering making a bridge over the drain. They want to make a walkway, and so they wanted to show me and have me walk over it, and that was just pretty cool. The other thing they did was one kiddo had an idea for a sound studio for songwriting, podcasts, and radio, and he had the idea. Teacher wrote the grant, counselor set it up, and this is all from a student. So that'll be there for many years. We've got a 17-year partnership with Project Discovery. We take kids off campus, so we're back to doing that again. Looking forward to getting them out of the classroom, working on some social skills, problem solving, working as a team, and that's been missing for the last 2 years. So any questions about Pioneer?
Any questions from the board? Seeing none, I guess, right now.
Good. All right, thank you guys. I appreciate your support. Yeah.
Thank you. We appreciate the presentation. It was very nice, nicely done. Thank you. And congratulations on the work you're doing. We appreciate it.
And thank you for taking tours with parents that are interested. Your staff, it was really helpful, and some people that we had that wanted to look at it, and that was very helpful. And it's nice to know that the campus is open for that kind of thing.
Yep, anytime.
And how many, sorry, I think you had it on the slide. How many Jumpstart kids do you have?
We
right
usually
now?
have 5 to 7 per year. That's one of the things we'd like to see more of.
Yeah.
We end up we're actually having more dual credits on the campus now than them going to WNC. I think it's a traveling issue,
Sure.
but we definitely have a small group at Jumpstart.
Yeah. No, but it's good that you have it. So I think having more options is good. I mean, like I've said it before, I have 3 kids. They're not kids anymore, but one did AP track, one did Jumpstart track, one did the traditional track, and there was something for everybody. And so I think it's important at Pioneer, just like at all schools.
Yeah, I think we've learned that adding those courses during their day, that we still have the kids doing Jumpstart, and we're going to keep promoting it. But the more we can add in during the day, they're a captive audience, and we'll run them through it. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate you.
Well, thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda item number 9, discussion on proposed changes to CCSD Regulation 525, student conduct and discipline. This is for discussion only, and Mr. Stokes is going to be presenting.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. As you know, the state of Nevada has had in the last several sessions of the legislature numerous bills associated with student conduct and actually the disciplinary measures that go along with that. And as a result, we have had several iterations of Regulation 525, and many of you have been familiar with that process as you have sat in on certain student hearings where we have had to consider the expulsion of students. One of the difficulties with student conduct and discipline and how it was dealt with was just a matter of vocabulary, really. There were questions about what does it mean to actually suspend a student? What does it mean to expel a student? And so over time, changes have helped to put a finer point on some of those conditions. And so with Regulation 525 and tonight's presentation, I hope to be able to explain what some of these changes are and certainly to answer any of your questions on how it impacts our work in the schools every day. Before I jump in, I want to make it clear, and I know you folks know this, but maybe for the benefit of our friends who are watching, community members, the board policies that are adopted by the board are a typical statement about any given topic. So we have a board policy 525 that has a philosophical perspective on the conduct and discipline of students, whereas, and the policies are actually approved by the board. Regulations, on the other hand, are a little more specific on how the process takes place. And so even though I'm describing the changes that are being proposed tonight, and we'll certainly listen to your feedback, this does not necessarily require board approval, but we always make sure that we bring these regulations to you so that you're familiar with the type of work that we're doing. So I know you have copies of the draft in front of you, and I would like to ask you to turn with me to page 4. And this is a part of the regulation that is already in place, but I also want you to know that you can take a look at this document, and anything that is bolded and has a strike through that is slated to be eliminated from the regulation. And anything that is bolded and is in italics, that's language that we would propose to add. So on page 4, Roman numeral 6, mandatory suspension or expulsion. Regardless of your perspective or your expectation about how student discipline is carried out, there are 4 items that are identified in the state of Nevada that will result in some sort of either suspension or expulsion, and they're listed there right in the middle of the page under general provisions. So if battery that results in the bodily injury of an employee of a school, distribution or sale of any controlled substance, possession of a firearm or dangerous weapon, or a habitual disciplinary problem, all of these conditions represent possibility for a student to be either suspended from school for some length of time or expelled for a period of time, or to be expelled permanently. So there are some conditions that are going to be explained in this process, but I wanted you to be aware that those are the conditions that could result in long-term suspensions or expulsions. On page 5, this is a significant change. As you know, as being board members, it in the past has always, before a student could be expelled permanently, the Board of Trustees had to be involved in the process, and they had to be able to review the circumstances before taking any action on a permanent expulsion. In the newest change, and now being implemented in our regulation, if you'll look just below item number 2, first sentence, it says, a student may be suspended from school or expelled for these 4 violations only, the ones that we just read, after the Board of Trustees, and you'll see in bold type, or its designee. So with this new language and this new change, the board can actually make a designee responsible for reviewing the circumstances and approving any action that might take place as a result of a long-term suspension and expulsion. So in most cases, and we can talk about this, but typically that designee would be me. So I have that ability to regularly contact you and interact with information that is going on. But that then makes it so you don't actually have to be present to sit through a student hearing and then actually take action on this event. So I wanted to start with that and see if you had any questions about what that might mean, or ask questions about the process as it currently exists and how this might actually change the process.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I mean, I think that it streamlines the process and maintains confidentiality for the student. I think that it makes a lot of sense to have a designee.
Yeah, I would agree. I was going to ask the question, why, just for the public's input, but Mike got there beforehand, so thanks for that. But I think it's important to maintain the confidentiality. You know, I don't want to say I enjoyed being a part of those processes. I appreciated it. There were hard decisions to be made, but I think, the superintendent is our employee, and we're entrusting them with the running of the district, so I think, that makes sense.
Is there a way that we can know that they're going on though? Because I think that's the thing that shifted me this year was before they changed the rules, we didn't know about all the hearings. And then when we got put into the process, it seemed like there were a lot of them, but come to find out it was pretty much par for course. So is there a way to put in here somewhere that at least the trustees will be notified, maybe not, we don't need to know the person, but notified that there's a hearing for whatever it was, just so that we're kind of in the loop?
So for clarity, would that look something like a dashboard with numbers? In February, we had X number of hearings, and as a result, X number of those students were suspended for up to 90 days, I mean, that's the idea. Would that
I
be
think you're on
something?
the right track, something
Okay.
like that, just so that it's at least it's on the top of our, we know what's going on so that we're not surprised when we have numbers come out.
Don't we
And
get disciplinary reports
Yeah.
from the different schools? We already get those. Is it quarterly or by semesters? How often do we get those?
The school district does put out a report on our activities that way, and certainly there's always one at the end of the year when our accountability report is put together.
But does it have hearings on there? I don't remember it having actual hearings. I know it has expulsions and suspensions, but if we're having 20 hearings, I'd kind of like to know about it. But that's just my preference. I mean,
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I'd like to know about it as well. I think Mr. Stokes has been good, not going over all the details, but in his weekly addresses, I think he keeps us really informed about what's transpired over the week, and, he'll kind of highlight those things without divulging the confidentiality portion of it.
so using that then, is that something, we have to figure out a way to keep that continuing though? There's no writing that says in your weekly update, you have to tell us how many hearings you are, so I'm just looking for maybe a little bit more formality.
If we want formality, this is the place to do it.
Right. So just that we're,
And I'll just push back. I don't necessarily think we need that a policy. If that's an expectation we have for the superintendent, then we communicate that. But, future school boards and superintendents might have a different system, and then they're having to change policies or regulations. I mean, if that's what the board is expecting of the superintendent, that's a communication piece. I don't think that's going to be a hard thing to accomplish.
Thanks for the feedback. Is it okay to move forward? Okay, so just in the next paragraph where it starts general education students, and then you'll see the bolded letter or text, and special education students. So that's a new addition to this regulation. May be suspended and expelled only if they are at least 11 years old. So I think this is also an important place just to pause, because it seems like some of our students are having, at a younger age, more difficulty in settling into school. And part of the concern of lawmakers in the state of Nevada was that students were being excluded from school at a younger and younger age. And so this situation includes special education students, but also kind of draws that line. A student has to be at least 11 years old or older before they can be suspended. So that does impact some of the responses that administrators have in the operation of their schools. If I could get you, yeah, go ahead, questions.
Before we go on, it may be good for the public to know that a lot of these changes are being driven by NRS, is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. This information is taken from bills that are passed in the legislature that then are canonized, codified, thank you, so that language is changed from bill language to statutory language.
Yeah, I just wanted the public to know that, thank you.
Okay, so on page 6, I wanted to describe habitual disciplinary problems, because sometimes this is also a condition that maybe just we desire a little more information about it, because as you recall, it is one of those items where a student can be suspended or expelled. And so a habitual disciplinary problem, if you look at number 2, and of course items 1, 2, and 3 helps to describe what it actually means to be considered as a habitual disciplinary problem. But it identifies that if a student has 5 significant suspensions from school of 3 days or more for any reason, then that's really the defining mechanism for using this as a way to discipline students. So if you have a student that continues to act out or gets in fights or causes other problems, then that student has to be suspended at least 5 times of 3 days or 3 consecutive days before that condition can occur. Mr. Walker.
So I'm just wondering, because in addition, or they could have started 2 fights, correct? Or did they take that out of the law?
I will have to get back to you on that. I don't know that exactly.
Yeah, it used to be one or the other.
Okay.
I still read it as or, because number 1 says threatened or extorted another student or teacher 2 or more times, or a record of 5 significant suspensions. So I think it is either or. If we're talking 2 threatening, that would be 2 fights.
And then, so item number 2 has that word significant that's bolded, and significant suspensions are then defined just in the paragraph below there. So that helps to give just some added clarity. There are questions, or there have been questions, at least in the past, around habitual disciplinary problems, and this does help to flesh that concept out to a greater degree. Then going on to page 8, and I think this is important because I mentioned earlier that the words suspension and expulsions are sometimes used interchangeably. This now gives a very clear definition, so school personnel can use these terms with families and in a way so that they're easily understood. So suspension means the disciplinary removal of a student from the school in which the student is currently enrolled for not more than 1 school semester. So really the determining factor associated with these definitions is a period of time. And so if you suspend a student for 91 days or longer than a semester, it becomes something else. But under this definition, a suspension is up to 90 days or essentially 1 semester. Coming down to the next article number 9, it describes expulsions and permanent expulsions. So again, thinking of it from a time perspective, an expulsion means the disciplinary removal of a student from a school for more than 1 semester. Okay, so here, if a student is excluded from school for 91 days, that would actually be called an expulsion versus a suspension. So again, I think we're trying to bring some continuity in the vocabulary words so that people are using these accurately and explaining these changes to families as well. Now, there is one little extra piece, and it's on the top of page 9, and it identifies a permanent expulsion as not being able to come back to the school or putting them in some kind of an alternative program, which could be online, it could be some other application. So those are the 3 important words here, I think, that will really help to bring some clarity as we're dealing with these things. So on page 10, at the bottom of the page, this is letter I, 2 things that have been added to the regulation that are also important. In the past, when a suspension was given at one of the schools, or when a student came to a hearing at the district level, that was the final say. There was no other way to appeal. Now, with this modified version, at the school site, if a student is suspended for up to 10 days, which is really that's the greatest number of days that a student can be suspended at one of our schools, then the student or the parent can actually appeal that condition. And that allows for a parent to say, I don't agree with what that measure of discipline is being given at the school, and so I want to have an opportunity to have that appealed. And the same thing happens going forward on page 12. No, page 13. There's an opportunity for the decision of the hearing panel, those panels that happen at the district level, to also be appealed. And so that's going to take us to take some steps to create a condition or even a part of a position, have someone that's responsible for being able to manage the appeals that come through as a result of student discipline. So I wanted to hover there and see if you had any questions, but instead of the school or the district being the final say, there is one appeal at each level that can occur. Mr. Walker?
Well, I guess in my mind, I'm just wondering, maybe the appeal, if, you know, you're the designee, then maybe that's when we could either have the trustees be appeal, or even we could have like a, I don't know, could we do a committee? Does it have to be all of us? Or could we do like a committee that kind of works with the designee?
I think that was for me, Mr. Walker.
For you.
I looked at you. You knew what I was saying.
I think you could do a committee. I think working in conjunction with the designee and making sure you're in compliance with the statute and the regulation would be important, but that strikes me as within the spirit of it.
I guess my only question on that, Mr. Russell, would be if a committee is making a determination and deliberating, does that constitute board action? Does that raise questions about the open meeting law?
Yeah, so any committee that is more than 2 people, or I should say that consists of more than 2 board members, is subject to the open meeting law, specifically if they're able to trim recommendations or options for the board. If the determination is still within the ultimate discretion of the designee, then it would be an advisory committee and not necessarily subject to the open meeting law.
Okay.
And these hearings are specifically excluded from the open meeting law, so we'd want to be in compliance.
I guess I'm not really concerned with it being advisory, because whoever the designee is going to be somebody who's knowledgeable in those procedures and kind of have that background knowledge of the students. So, I mean, I think advisory is, I think that's appropriate for what we do.
Okay. Any other thoughts? I think we can make that work.
Just for clarification, if a student is suspended for 10 days, and then the parents, or they have 5 days to appeal it, when does the suspension start? Does it start immediately, and then they have appeal after it starts, or is it put on hold?
Well, and that's the question here, because theoretically, if a student is suspended for 4 days and they submit an appeal, and in most cases, that suspension happens immediately, so that if the student, let's say, was involved in a violent act of in some way, then that person, the administrator typically wants to have that person stay out, cool down, get themselves together. And so it generally takes place immediately. But if the hearing can't happen before the suspension is done, that creates some conditions that we're gonna have to work this out. And I don't even know if all families or children would seek an appeal. So some of this is untested. We're probably going to be doing some modifications after we try it and see how it works out. And certainly the nice thing about Nevada, we have an opportunity to be collaborative with other school districts. We borrow from each other and try to use those best practices as we move into it. But it will take some tweaking and some modifying for us to have an operation that works smoothly.
I mean, I think we want to also support our schools we don't want to tie their hands, especially, I mean, things are going south and sometimes in these schools, and we need our administrators to be able to make decisions they need to make. And so I think that Mr. Stokes working with the principals, I think we need to find a system where we have something in place, because sometimes you just need something.
Thank you. That really takes me through the changes that were significant in this document. But I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have. If, as you read through it, you stopped on something that gave you pause or you desired additional information.
Do we have any questions from the board at this time?
Okay.
Seeing none, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, and I appreciate the feedback, and we'll put this into practice.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda item number 10, presentation and discussion on budget assumptions for the Carson City School District for fiscal year 2022 and 2023. Mr. Andrew Fueling, and this is for discussion only. Thank you.
All right, thank you, President Varner. Good evening, trustees. I know what you're thinking at this moment, and I want you to be assured that I do have a Donald Rumsfeld quote in this presentation, which has been key for many years. So we will get to that here very shortly. That's right. That's right. Okay. So first, so this is our first look at budget this spring. So it's important to know the timeline again, and this has been what we've had to work with over the past years. Two things that I'll note, because these used to be really, really important to us in doing revenue projections. Halfway through the month of February, we would get preliminary projections from the Department of Taxation. Late March, we would get final revenue projections from the Department of Taxation. While they still send these numbers, they are completely meaningless to us. Because as we've talked about, all local wealth, all property taxes, all sales taxes, local school support tax in this instance, it all goes to the state now. We do not take in any of those funds. So while it's nice information to have, it really doesn't mean a whole lot to us, because ultimately all of those monies are going to the state, and it's up to the state then to decide how they want to disperse that. Mid-April, here, April 12th, we'll be presenting the tentative budget to you. And just as a reminder, the tentative budget is kind of the first presentation of an official budget document, but it is for discussion only and for input, but there is not a document for approval at that time. I need to turn that in to the Department of Taxation then on the 15th of April. At the last board meeting in May, we will have the budget hearing. That is for approval. And then that document, when approved, is submitted to several state agencies before the 8th of June. So my favorite quote of all time, there are known knowns. There are things we know that we know. There are known unknowns. That is to say, there are things that we know we don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns. There are things we don't know we don't know. Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense under George W. Bush, and Jerry Ford when he was president. And I put this in the presentations because I actually think it is one of the more brilliant quotes ever said. And he was kind of panned at the time in the media for this statement, but it is, when you talk about the theory of knowledge, this is about as pure as it gets. So unknown unknowns, usually it's because of the legislature, but it is not a legislative year. So as far as I know, we don't have any unknown unknowns, but again, they're unknown. So we don't really know if we don't have them. The known knowns here, so the most significant impact of this is going to be with an average daily enrollment. So as you are aware, our enrollment is down this year. And because of how far it dropped, there kicked in this hold harmless for enrollment as far as revenue calculations. And so the benefit to us for this year was that it helped stabilize revenues for the year. However, it is only for 1 year. So we're going to be feeling the full impact then of the change in enrollment going into next year. That final funded ADE, or average daily enrollment, then of course is not known. So it'll be really interesting going into next year to see how what enrollment looks like, kind of getting into our first normal year in some time. Special education funding. So in the state budget, there's a 2.5% increase, but that does not necessarily mean that our special ed funding will increase by 2.5%. It depends on enrollment and the number of students with IEPs in the district. So generally, we expect some increase, but to say it would be exactly 2.5% would probably not be the way to look at it. IDEA at 20%. So the history of the IDEA, so when this first came in to effect and became a funding stream for school districts to help with special education costs, the cost of special education was supposed to be 40% of it was supposed to be covered by the federal government through IDEA. It currently is about 10% of the total cost of all of the services that districts across the country have to provide. One of the things that was talked about was increasing the feds talking about increasing the level of funding, basically doubling it from where it currently stands. I have not heard much on this lately. It was something that was being discussed months ago. I would not hold out hope that it's going to change, but it is something that at least I'll have an eye on as time goes on. So state economic health, this is always a concern, but it's especially a concern now. So the funding that we receive with the new pupil-centered funding plan, one of the significant differences, significant changes that happen is under the old Nevada plan, the level of funding was guaranteed. So when they said you're going to get this, they called it the per pupil guarantee. When they said you're going to get this dollar amount per pupil, that was going to come regardless of how the state was doing. They would have to figure out a way. That guarantee is now gone. So if by chance the state would have some significant economic problem in the future, that could actually impact us during the school year, and the state can adjust funding during the school year, which is really problematic when most of your costs are staffing. So we don't know what that really looks like yet, and I would argue that the state doesn't know what that looks like yet because it just hasn't happened. But I would assume it probably looks something like when COVID originally hit and the state was coming to us saying, you know, there was all these state grants that they had given us. What have you not used? What can you give back? Along those lines. But it would I think it would be a little more significant to absorb. And we're currently in labor negotiations, and all of our contracts expire with our associations on June 30th, 2022. So that is something we're actively working through that will ultimately have an impact on these numbers. Nutrition. So in years past, this has always been a significant item for us. As you know, in the general fund, we annually have had to transfer funds from the general fund to the nutrition fund to cover the deficit that exists, the structural deficit that exists in the nutrition fund. This year, all meals have been free for students, and that has made it so that a transfer will not be necessary this year, which has been beneficial to the general fund. At the federal level, this continuing this type of program has been talked about. We have not heard anything definitive, but it at least, the idea is there that potentially the feds would want to continue just offering free meals to students forever. So until that happens, and this is an update from the presentation I originally put together. So on February 23rd, we received a release from Governor Sisolak that the state is planning on using its federal funds, and I'm assuming, it didn't specify, but I'm assuming some of their ESSER funding, or ARPA funding, to provide free student meals for next year and the year after. I have no idea what that looks like in practice or how that will happen. I don't know if it certainly will happen, but it at least has been on paper a commitment that seems to be being made by the governor, and so we'll learn more about that. The upside, if that happens, is depending on the reimbursement rates the state would be giving us. I don't know if they'd be equivalent to the current federal reimbursement rates, but likely then the next 2 years we would not have to transfer funds from the general fund to the nutrition fund. So that's good. Known knowns, we will have school next year, so that's a positive. The pupil-centered funding plan, as you know, we are under the hold harmless provision, and that likely will continue for 3 to 6 more years. But ultimately, the number of years there is assuming there's some kind of consistent increase over time, and ultimately that's up to the legislature. So what that looks like is really unknown. And as you know, there are districts that benefited with the change to the new funding formula. There are some districts that are in much worse shape than we are. So still more to see with how the legislature attacks the problem of school funding here in the next session. So being in hold harmless, our general fund revenue is frozen at 99.39% of our fiscal 20 per pupil revenue amount. That lovely percentage exists because once during the legislative session, they calculated out this massive spreadsheet that had divvied out all the funds. They realized that it had calculated a slightly too high of an amount, and so they just multiplied everything by 99.39% to make it fit. Kind of a Procrustean bed. And then looking at the current year versus next year, the model that was used to create the funding for the pupil-centered funding plan, there were some assumptions in there that were not maybe the best assumptions, but COVID also was part of an impact in some of those decisions. But our level of funding actually will go down. Our per pupil amount will actually go down next year by $10 from $77.63 to $77.53. So not only do you have the impact of losing that average daily enrollment hold harmless, you have the fact that our hold harmless level itself is actually going to be decreasing next year slightly. Within the weighted funding categories in the PCFP, so you have the English learner funding, gifted and talented funding, and at-risk funding. Those totals are look to be stable, just really minor changes. The auxiliary funding, transportation, and nutrition that resides in there are stable as well. And then what is called the local special education funding. So that's kind of an odd one, but basically they, as sort of a funding source, which is kind of a strange way to think about it, they looked at historically how much money districts had transferred from their general funds to their special education funds. And instead of just giving us general fund dollars and saying, make the transfer, now they're saying, here's about what you have always transferred, and go ahead and transfer that. And it's not that you have to transfer that amount, it's just in the methodology, how they have justified some of the funding coming in. So I won't spend any more time on that because it gets kind of confusing, but I guess let me know if you have questions, I can give you some more detail. As you know, in the transition from the Nevada plan to the pupil-centered funding plan, there were many, many grants that were rolled into the general fund and into these weighted funds. So all of these grants have now gone away. And in the process of the last legislative session, the funding that was there was, it's kind of stated that, well, we took all these grant dollars and moved them over. Well, they actually were in the process of being rolled over, in most cases reduced. So on paper, it looked like all these grants were rolling in, and that was good, but ultimately the level of funding coming from the grants is not the same amount that came over into the general fund or the weighted funds. And I spoke to this before, but I thought graphically it might be, I don't know, maybe a little more impactful or memorable. But so in the past, in fiscal 21, the revenues for the district, you have that local and state share, and that adjusts over time depending on local revenues coming in. When the economy tanked back in 07, 08, 09, and kind of the impact felt soon thereafter, local revenues are really down and the state had to kick in more. Now, in the past years, as the economy has recovered, the local revenue portion made up more than the state revenue portion. And again, the local revenue portion was the local school support tax, primarily the local school support tax, government services tax, which is from people registering their cars, and property taxes. So again, all of those local revenues, everybody's property taxes on their property tax bill, when it says here's how much is going to school, is 75 cents. The 2.6% of sales tax that is considered the local school support tax, we no longer receive any of those revenues. They all go into the state coffers. And then the state decides how those are going to be redistributed back to us. So the graphic on the right really illustrates that. So ultimately, it looks like all of our revenues are pretty much 98.9% of our revenues are now state revenues, whereas local is 0.9. There's still a little bit there. So then an estimate of the average daily enrollment that I'm working with right now is 7,286.5 students. I'm working with Davis Demographics, which a number 4 or 5 years ago had done some projections for us on enrollment, did a 5-year projection. So I'm working with them again to put together a 5-year projection for us, just to verify against what else I've come up with, but it'll be good for planning purposes. So multiplied against that per pupil amount, that gives you the adjusted base. And then there are these other parts of the pupil-centered funding plan funding that come into effect. And then also a little bit of extra local funds and a little bit of federal funds. And altogether, that is about $67.7 million in general fund revenue. That is about $3.3 million less than what we have in the current year budgeted. And again, that impact, while losing $10 on the per pupil amount is something, it is primarily the impact of that drop in enrollment. On the expense side, staffing. So again, we're in negotiations right now, but in general, we know some of these costs. So for steps, within our salary schedules, that costs about $733,000. Every 1% increase is about an additional $659,000. We're assuming a 9% increase in health insurance, which we know is a maximum, and that's about $400,000. PERS expected to be stable at this point, we hope. I will say I I have concerns about the PERS rate, and the reason is, while we've been with everything happening in the news, the stock markets have not been doing so well. But even before kind of this last 2 weeks happened, with the staffing shortages, the vacancies that we are seeing, one of the primary driving factors of the health of PERS is the number of payrolls happening. And with all of these vacant positions, there are not the same number of payrolls happening that they take into account and expect to have to help fund all of their obligations. So while that rate seems really high, I do have some concern that that could actually increase. So something that we'll keep an eye on here going into the following year. Non-staffing costs, so expecting to reduce non-staffing costs by at least $1 million in the work that has already been going on, that has really already been done. The Cops in Schools, so that was the original name of the grant where Sheriff Furlong was able to, with the feds, get funds to help us slowly bring on our two of our school resource officers. Later, there was another grant that allowed us to add another 3. All of those grants are now gone. And so while we share the cost of 2 of our school resource officers with the sheriff's office, the other 3 we pay the full cost for. So that is about $560,000 budgeted for next year. Technology replacement, really this is boiled down to replacing Chromebooks in 6th and 9th grade annually at a minimum. And so we, within the ESSER budget that we have now submitted to Department of Education for approval for a revision for this next and the following year, that is built into that budget for next year and the following year. So we have every expectation that we'll be purchasing Chromebooks for all 6th and 9th graders the next 2 years using ESSER funds. An early bottom line estimate, so based on the change in revenue, but also some of the changes in costs, taking into account operational reductions, taking into account known turnover. And I'll say we are really early in the game for known turnover. This is something we usually don't really start getting letters for a couple more months. So that will be something that will likely improve this number over time as retirements happen, and we expect new staff to come in and take their place. As well, the hiring leg or vacancy discount, and this again is just taking into account that we don't expect every single position to be full at all times, and so there's some discount you give to the total cost of all of your staffing. If you take all that into account, that early bottom line number looks to be about a $1.5 million deficit, which given the reduction in revenues and kind of where we are, that's a decent place. I feel like that's a decent place to be starting for right now. That number will only get better as we approach the tentative budget and as we approach then the final original budget that we bring to you in May. So the ESSER budgets, just because it's of interest, next year we have plans to spend about $5 million and then an additional $5 million in the following year. And then at that point, our access to ESSER funds goes away. So just looking ahead a little bit, and this is, we've been talking about this for some time, but just kind of reiterating that this is in mind on fiscal year 25. That's $5 million in expenditures. The revenue covering those expenditures goes away. So we likely will still be in hold harmless in fiscal 25, which means our funding level will likely be 99.39% of what we received in fiscal 20, 5 years earlier. So that is clearly something that is on the radar and that we're planning for. We've been working this year and we'll continue to be looking for opportunities to reduce any of our ongoing operational costs as much as possible. Those conversations are kind of always there in our meetings. So, and a desire within the parameters now the state has with restrictions, but trying to maintain a maximum fund balance now so that when we get to fiscal 25, if we need to offset some of that loss in revenue, as was termed, the freeze and squeeze is happening, so that fund balance will help offset that, hopefully. So that is all. And I'm happy
Any
to
questions from the
take any
board at this
questions.
time? Stacy, go ahead.
Didn't know that the city wasn't funding the other 3 cops in the schools. Has there been any discussion at their level about the other 2?
So I'm in conversations with the sheriff's office about that right now. It's something that I've brought up as a long-term consideration to look at how those costs are shared between us and possibly adjusting them. But it's not something that likely would be changed for next year, but looking down the road, potentially, that would be something that we'd be looking to try to work out with the sheriff's office.
And then with the rise in gas prices and diesel, do you think that's going to impact us this year?
Yeah. So for this year, at this point, I mean, so this increase in gas costs has happened very quickly and just very recently. Up until this point, we are on track to spend, I think I have it at about $185,000, which 3 years ago, we spent about 200. It was the highest we had in a very long time, and it was about 210. So we're at this point expected to be a little bit under budget, but I would expect when the next gas bill comes in, it's going to be quite a bit higher. So if we end up getting back toward budget, where we are the kind of $205,000 to $210,000 range, I think that's probably a reasonable place we'll end up. It's something that, looking at next year, as we go into these next couple months, really tracking what's happening. I guess I'm not expecting gas prices to improve anytime soon. A barrel of oil on the markets jumped over $130 for a little while yesterday and maybe today, which is, I believe, the highest price. The last time we saw a price near there was 2007, I think. Right before the recession, we had that pop in gas prices or in barrels of oil. So, yeah, it's something we'll definitely have to consider when we're budgeting for next year.
On that $400 line item for that 9% health insurance, you were saying that's a maximum increase. Is it too early to kind of tell where we're going to be? I assume it is, but.
Yeah, and really it's, so what's kind of strange with the health insurance costs is that if there is an increase, it comes into effect on January 1st. So I know what the cost is through the end of December. It's then budgeting for that increase as of January 1st. And it's usually not until, I want to say, October that I think September, October, we have a pretty good feel for what it is. And I think it gets locked in then, or kind of we go through our final decision-making process, October, November. And then I think it's brought to you then in November for approval for the plan for the following year. So it'll be a little bit yet, but we'll be having those conversations. I believe we usually have a meeting with our broker before the end of the school year, and then usually again right kind of near the beginning of the school year as numbers start coming in.
Okay.
Any other questions? Just for clarification, I have one. The $5 million in the ESSER funds that's been expended in fiscal year 23 and 24, does that cover ongoing everyday expenses, or is that above our regular budget? Because my concern is, once they go away, are we going to be in a $5 million deficit right away?
Yeah, so those funds, there are items in there that are above and beyond, but many of the items would otherwise be a part of either our general fund or some other fund budget. So that'll be when you talk about fiscal cliff scenarios, so that is when we get to that point. And that's, I mean, the huge benefit we have is there are 2 years of this funding to help us work toward what that looks like. And we still have 2 legislative sessions before we get there. Or 1. Sorry, yeah, 1. I was hoping for 2. Sorry. 1 legislative session. So I feel like the session starting in February this coming year, coming out of that, we'll have a much better feel, I think, of the long run implications of the hold harmless for us. If the legislature comes together and funding for education is stagnant once again, then there's probably going to be more difficult conversations of how we attack that fiscal cliff piece. If the legislature considers these adequacy studies that have been done over the last decade and recommendations from the Commission on School Funding as to how to work towards that, then it might be a very different conversation.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. And it's not a pretty picture, but thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 11. It's approval of the consent agenda. This is for possible action, so I'll take a motion.
I'll move that we accept the consent agenda as submitted.
Motion by Mike, second by Joe. There is an opportunity for public comment before we take the vote. Any public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none. Any online public comment?
No, Mr. Varner, thank you.
Seeing none, I'll go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay.
Aye.
Thank you, Don. Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item number 12, informational items. No discussion on these. No action will be taken. Everybody can read those. I think you probably already have. Next would be the request for future agenda items. Seeing no request for future agenda items, we are adjourned. Thank you, guys.